Hey, welcome to World Entertainment, and we're finally finishing off the reviews for Terminator Zero, episode 6, 7, and 8. This will probably be quite a quick review because there's no real way to discuss episodes 7 and 8 without spoiling massive turns of events that happen. So I'm not going to spoil those, but I will touch on elements that they've introduced, especially at the beginning of episode 7, which is a big kind of new bit of lore to the whole Terminator franchise and may have big repercussions for how you view the Terminator franchise going forward. As for episode 6, it's pretty much the run away and try and get away from all, not just the Terminators, but the helper robot things. I believe they're called EUs or something like that. And it's kind of more revealing of the nanny, Mikete or something like that her name is, where they come across a robot kind of hung up, and it turns out guys hung it up outside a graveyard and rigged it up with explosives, which she tries to take it down and it explodes, and they realize that she's a machine, and something clicks on her and her eyes turn red and she kills them. Well, almost all of them, but it's in self-defense. It's not her doing it as she's now evil. She was doing it in self-defense and to try and protect the kids, because one of the guys grabs the kids and a whole situation happens between her and the older brother in all of this scenario. And they do find out that yes, the younger sister and the somewhat hero, the Kyle Reese of the show, if you like, we're in fact going to this Catland. It's either called Catland or Cat World. It's like an amusement park that the kid's mother loved going there with them and stuff. And they go there and the older brother gets tricked with the voice switch from the Terminator, and the Terminator catches him and pretty much uses him to try and force Malcolm to open the door. And Malcolm refuses. You find out Malcolm was willing to sacrifice one of his kids so the Terminator could not get access to his system, Kamoko or whatever the hell the thing is called. That's pretty much everything that kind of happens in episodes. It's just kind of tension building between the older brother and the nanny, basically cyborg, and finding out a little more. We find out about the kid's mother, what actually happened to her, and it's that she died in a bus crash. The bus driver had a heart attack, the bus crashed, and she instantly died. She hit, I think he said he hit her head or something on a metal bar on the bus, and it killed her instantly and all that stuff. But then we find things out about him and stuff that is very interesting. Now, as for episode 7, what it starts with is a future. It's weird to say it's a flashback of the future, but it's a flashback for the Kyle Reese character, whatever she's called. And it's her talking to the old woman who you still don't find out who she is. Like, I think it's trying to make you think it's Sarah Connor, but there's nothing really indicating that it is Sarah Connor. But she's teaching her about timelines, and this is where it's really interesting what they do in the lore with the timelines in this case, but it also muddies the water a small bit with the actual movies and stuff. So she's basically explaining, right, time you think is a straight line and that you can go back from this end to that end, but you're still in this timeline, that whatever you do in this past will affect this future. And they explain that's not the case because you're not actually going back to the past of this present. So like the present being their future. So if you go back and change something, it doesn't affect them, because, and they've explained this in episode 2, I think it was, where they said as soon as something goes back, it changes a timeline. And that seems to be very much what they're elaborating on in this, is if you go back and you change things, you don't stop anything happening that happened to this future. So if you go back and stop Judgment Day, the future that you've come from still goes through its Judgment Day. It doesn't change that. And that the timeline isn't straight. It's all these zigzags and stuff like that. And that's where it kind of muddies the water a little bit when you think of the franchise in a whole. That, oh, so everything they went back and tried to stop kind of didn't work as much as you'd think it did. Which I think kind of leans into a bit more with Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, when John Connor has that conversation with the T-800 in the car, and he's like, how are you here? We stopped Judgment Day. And he says, you didn't stop it, you just postponed it, that it's inevitable. And it kind of leans into that you can go back and you can change all you want. It won't stop what happened in the future you came from, whichever future you came from. So they said basically you can create all these different timelines, but whatever future you came from, it doesn't change what happens there. They'll never see peace and stuff like that. And they established that is the mistake that Skynet makes, is that it doesn't realize that because it's man-made and stuff, it kind of almost thinks like people, where it hasn't copped on that once it sends something back to try and take out resistance members and stuff, it's not actually changing its own fate that it lost to John Connor in the future, that the resistance won. And no matter what it does, it will never change that outcome. So I thought that was really interesting what they did with that. And they do elaborate a little more in terms of how things are happening in this show that kind of result from all that type of stuff. That kind of comes around in episode 7 as well, and episode 8. And it's, you know, you can't really go into that without spoiling all the stuff, and I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't watched it yet, or maybe are wondering should they watch it. I think you really should. Now, when it comes to the heroes and people saying, oh, it goes very woke and stuff, it absolutely does not. In fact, and I said this from the beginning with the hero, the Kyle Reese of this show, UK or something, I can never remember what her name is. She's constantly getting her ass whooped, and by the end of it, she actually fails, basically, in what she does. You know, she gets her hand absolutely destroyed by the Terminator. She thinks she defeated it, and it comes out, grabs her hand, and just like squashes her hand. And she's already injured up to that point, so she gets brutalized throughout this show. So she's not this unstoppable hero. Now, the main part people had the issue with was she was able to take a hit from the Terminator and didn't die, and she was able to push it. Yeah, I understand that, but at the same time, Kyle Reese took a punch to the face by the Terminator at the end of T1, and he was fine. You know, he got up and walked it off almost. So there, and it does show you elements where it makes sense that if the Terminator wants to kill you with a punch, it can kill you. There's a great moment actually when the nanny, Masiki or something like that, or Masuki maybe, I can't remember the names. Well, one of the ways she kills one of the guys at the graveyard when they're attacking her, she headbutts him in the back of his head, and it just splatters his head. It's just like, oh, that's a interesting new way for the machine to kill in this franchise. But overall, as a whole show, I think it's definitely worth a watch, especially if you are a fan of the Terminator franchise. I think it adds new elements to the franchise. I think it adds interesting and, you know, bits of lore that work and make more sense as well. And there are little Easter eggs that are kind of hinting at certain things, but you're not 100% sure. So overall, I would recommend checking out the show and where it goes. And like, you don't expect where it goes and what it does. I definitely wasn't, and I think it's, again, quite interesting and quite new for the franchise. I think it really does add brand new storytelling to the Terminator franchise and shows you what you could do with new movies without taking James Cameron's whole thing off. Or you have to just ignore the past 40 years of the franchise, just eject everything and start completely afresh. Yeah, that's called a reboot, James. But this thing shows you how you can absolutely do new things, but keep it in the canon of the whole franchise and build onto that. So definitely recommend it. So with that, that is the final reviews for Terminator Zero. It definitely looks like they're leaning into a season 2, so God knows when we'd get that. And again, the animation, especially in these last 3 episodes, are great as well, especially with the T800. Well, I'm assuming he's meant to be a T800. It looks like a T800, but I don't think it is. I think it's either a number up or a number below, but the animation on him looks great in episode 8 when the skin starts coming off. So with that, I shall leave it there for this one. Cheers, and I will catch you in the next one.